All right, so where did we stop last class? We stopped at data acquisition, digital numbers, spatial resolution, etc. All these terms we were introduced to, and we discussed all those topics, right? So today we will continue with a little more portion of data acquisition. So one of it is reference data. So what do you mean by this reference data? So what is this reference data in the first place? Because we know we are collecting the satellite imagery, or we are collecting remote sensing data from various sources, from various heights, from various locations at various time periods, etc. Right? So whatever data you are collecting, you need to correlate it with the actual ground truth, right? What is there on the ground exactly? Suppose you are collecting a aerial photograph. Okay, you are collecting an aerial photograph, and at one location you saw a particular feature, and you assume that that particular feature is something. Maybe you observe some greenery and you assume that it is a coconut tree. Okay, a canopy you see and you assume that it is a coconut tree. But how do you know, or how do you make sure that it is a coconut tree, or it's a particular, or some other feature, some particular feature it is? How do you make sure of that? So for that you need some reference data, right? Suppose you know, maybe you don't know what a coconut tree looks like from above, a canopy of a group of coconut trees, you don't know how it will look like, right? So suppose you have a reference data, suppose you have another aerial image where people have already identified that, okay, coconut tree canopy will look like this from above. Okay, now when you compare that with the new image that you have procured, you can identify that, right? That it is a coconut tree, isn't it? So that is an example for a reference data. You should be able to refer it, or you should be able to compare it with the actual ground truth, right? So the initial image that you have, the sample or reference data you have, that might have already been correlated and checked. Maybe you take an aerial photograph, you mark a particular coordinate, and you go to the ground, you go to the field, and you will identify that, okay, this at this particular point the feature is so and so, and you will identify, okay, if it will look like this in the aerial photograph. So you will go to the ground and you will identify what the ground truth is, or what the reference data is, right? So based on that you can identify a future aerial image, right? So similar thing is, the same concept goes for all the remote sensing data. So all the remote sensing data that you procure, it is associated with a reference data or ground truth. So this reference data is also called the ground truth, as the name suggests, right? What exactly lies on the ground, right? So the ground truth that you collect, it will vary depending upon what your application is. Suppose maybe sometimes it is a soil survey map, sometimes it's a water quality lab report, sometimes it's an aerial photograph or a field check. So for all these for all these you need reference data. So for different analysis or different applications, you can acquire your reference data from different sources, right? So and all these sources, it should be the reference data, it is always associated with the geographic position of that data, right? So as I mentioned earlier, you have the aerial photograph of the campus. Suppose you have an aerial photograph of the campus, and you have a coconut orchard. Okay, you have a coconut tree plantation, and you know that in that aerial photograph, this particular location, you know the coordinates of that location. So what you will do with the GPS, you will go on the ground and you will go to the same exact coordinates, and at that point you will correlate, right, the coordinates in that image and the coordinates on the ground. You will correlate it and you will identify the reference data, right? So all these data, all these reference data, it should be connected to the geographic, exact geographic position, right? That is precisely marked using a GPS. Then only your reference data is useful, right? So you can't observe some point on the aerial photograph and go to some other location on the ground and say that, okay, this is my ground truth. You can't do that, right? The exact position should match, right? So for that, the reference data is always associated with the geographic position at which that field data is procured. right? So there are many applications of reference data. They are many purposes for this reference data. So one of it is aiding in the analysis and interpretation of remote sensing data, just like I mentioned now. You are procuring that aerial photograph, you will be able to analyze that aerial image, and you will be able to interpret at what particular location what particular feature is there. So it will aid in analysis and interpretation of the procured remote sensing data. Then you can also use it to calibrate a sensor. Suppose you have a ground truth, you have observed the spectral reflectance pattern of the ground truth, okay, and you got maybe an image that was captured in the infrared region, and you are observing its spectral reflectance pattern, right? And you know for sure that on the ground this particular feature is so and so. So that reflectance pattern of a particular feature you know very clearly. So that can be used to calibrate the sensor in the calibrate the sensor in the whatever uh, whatever you're using to procure that data, right? So that sensors can be calibrated using the already known spectral reflectance pattern. That is one example, right? Then another thing is you can use it to verify the information extracted from the remote sensing data. Again, going back to the coconut plantation example, maybe you have obtained you know what is there on the ground, you know the ground truth or the reference data, and you are procuring a aerial photograph. So you can verify that maybe you can verify that your aerial photograph what you have taken at a particular location for that particular coordinates, it is matching. Your data is actually the data that you are collected is actually matching the reference data. So you can verify your remote sensing data as well, right? So you can either use it to analyze and interpret remote sensing data, you can use it to calibrate a sensor, and you can also use it to verify the data extracted as well. All right. So you cannot always go into the ground and map everything on the ground, right? So it's a very time consuming process, right? You cannot suppose the satellite image, it covers an area of 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers. You cannot cover each and every single feature in this 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers space, right? So it's a very expensive and time consuming method, collecting this reference data. And there are two types of reference data collection. One is time critical and one is time stable. Can you mention a few time critical measurements? Time critical. So time critical means where the ground conditions change rapidly with time. With time your ground condition changes. So one very simple example of time critical measurements is the vegetation conditions, or another one is water pollution events, right? Water pollution events, you might have seen oil spills and etc., or waste from dying plants, etc. So they will sustain for a very short period of time, and then they will dissolve, or they will dissolve, right? Dissolve, or they will spread apart, and you might not be able to notice it from a remotely sensed image, right? Similarly, vegetation conditions, here you can see an image, right? This is the same field. The remote sensing data has been procured at different seasons of cultivation. Here you can see. Do you think this is a time stable or a time critical reference? This is time critical, right? You can see with different seasons, your response from the ground, what you're observing in the remote sensing data, it is different, right? So this is a time critical measurement. This one. What is this? Here you can see a particular city, the expansion of a particular city. These photos are taken at two different times, not just two different seasons, maybe a difference of maybe 5 years or 10 years. You can see some settlements in the center, and in the bottom image you can see the settlements have expanded very widely. It has expanded, right? This is a time stable or time critical measurement. This is also time critical, right? So these vegetations, water pollution events, and urbanization, these are all time critical measurements, right? Then we also have time stable measurements. Some of the geological features, you might have time stable features, right? maybe a particular rock outcrop, rock type, or particular geology that you observe at a particular site. These might be time stable. That means the materials in the observation, it doesn't change rapidly with time. So most of that time stable applications come in geology. All right. Then, as I mentioned earlier, this data that you are collecting, the ground truth data or the reference data that you are collecting, so they are basically for a remote sensing image. What data do you use to correlate what you have procured? Suppose you are procuring the spectral reflectance pattern in the infrared region. All right. Suppose you are procuring an image in the near infrared region. Suppose, okay, and maybe the vegetations and all, they might look red color, right? So you might not be able to, with your eyes itself, you might not be able to identify that, right? So you will have to compare it with the spectral reflectance pattern in different wavelengths, right? That will be your reference data in such cases, isn't it? So it basically depends. So anything apart from the visible wavelength, you might not be able to make it out with your eyes, right? So you will definitely need some reference data. Do you agree with that? Anything other than the visible spectrum, anything other than what is recorded in the visible spectrum, will you be able to make it out with your eyes? Will you be able to do so? No, right? So you will always need a reference data, isn't it? You will always need to compare that reflectance pattern with something else. Here you can see different colors. You can see this is captured in the infrared region. So if you are looking at the center right image, you might not be able to make it out with your eyes, because from the visible spectrum you see that it is a red color, some yellow color. You see, you have no idea what is there on the ground, right? But if you have already a sample, if you have the spectral reflectance pattern of near IR of various features, you might be able to crisscross and match it, right? You might be able to cross check it, and you might be able to match it with some particular features, and you will be able to identify, okay, this particular color or this particular reflectance pattern represents this particular feature, isn't it? Right? So for different features on the ground, for collecting reference data, you collect it in two ways. I mean, majorly you collect it in two ways. One is the spectral reflectance pattern, or the emittance of the surface materials. It's basically your spectral reflectance or emittance pattern, isn't it? So this is collected using a method called spectroscopy, using a spectroradiometer. It looks something like this, the left image. All these are spectroradiometers, and it can be handheld, it can be mounted on a machine like this, it can be mounted on helicopters, it can be mounted on drones. You are basically collecting the spectral reflectance pattern in different wavelengths, and you are going to use it as your reference data for a much wider application. Clear? So this is one example of collecting a reference data. You can collect your spectral reflectance pattern using a spectroradiometer, right? So they will continuously record the reflectance pattern in various spectrums in many different bands. In different wavelength bands, it will collect your spectral reflectance pattern. So in whichever, suppose this machine is collecting the spectral reflectance of this particular crop, all right, it is collecting it in various wavelengths, all right, maybe from UV to microwave. Suppose in all the wavelengths, in thousands of bands, it is collecting the spectral reflectance pattern. Now if you have a remote sensing system that operates in any of these bandwidths, any of these wavelength ranges, you can compare it with the data already collected with this radio spectrometer, right? Spectroradiometer, isn't it? So here you have your reference data. So any wavelength, the remote sensing sensor, it is collecting the data. You can compare it with the already collected reference data from the spectroradiometer, and you can correlate, and you can identify your new feature identified in the remote sensing data. Clear? So all these data that you are collecting, it need to be associated with the precise geographic location. Then only you can correlate the data, isn't it? You procure an aerial image, you mark a particular coordinate on the ground, and you have collected a reference data at the same location on the ground, then only you can correlate it, isn't it? So the exact location at which the data is collected need to be known. So for that, what do you need? You will need a global positioning system. You collect the data and you need to know the exact coordinates at which that data has been collected from, right? So everyone is familiar with GPS here, I believe. Everyone have seen a GPS system, or everyone have used GPS in your mobile phones, yes or no? Is there anyone who haven't experienced that? So when you open your phone, you open Google Maps in your phone, maybe. Suppose you open Google Maps in your phone, and it will show your, when you turn on the location services in your phone, it will show your exact location, isn't it? How is that possible? How does that work? Sometimes it will take a lot of time to pinpoint your exact location, isn't it? Sometimes you will lose the exact location. So why does that happen? How is it working? Have you thought about it ever? All right, so you are actually pinpointing your location based on the data collected from a set of satellites orbiting the Earth. There are 24 satellites around the Earth on non-orbit. These 24 satellites from the US. Okay, I'm talking about the US GPS system. Okay, in the US GPS system, you have 24 satellites orbiting the Earth. You have 4 or more sub-satellites in each of 6 different orbit planes. You have divided the Earth into different orbit planes, and you have 4 or more sub-satellites in each of the 6 orbit planes that has been defined. And they revolve around the Earth every 12 hours. Every 12 hours they will cover the Earth, and they travel at an altitude of 20,200 kilometers. Right? At an altitude of 20,200 kilometers. Do you know at what altitude do we fly? If you're taking a plane, if you're taking a flight to travel between two places, do you know at what height do we fly? We fly at something about 37,000 feet, that is about 10 kilometers from the earth ground. All right, that is the height at which generally the flights operate. Okay, the average height. So that's about 10 kilometers from the earth surface. Okay, so these satellites, they orbit the earth at an altitude of 20,000 kilometers. All right, it's very far away, isn't it? Yeah, so these orbits, they are inclined 60 degrees from the equator, and they are spaced every 60-degree longitude. All right, so to pinpoint your exact location, how many satellites connection do you need? What do you think? There are 4 or more satellites in each of the 6 different orbit planes. Okay, and in each of these orbit planes you have these so many satellites, and you are at one particular location. Suppose you are sitting at your home right now, and your mobile, it will send some signals. It will connect with the satellite orbiting the earth, and the satellite will be able to pinpoint your location. How many satellites do you need, do you think you need, to pinpoint your exact location, and why? Anyone? From one satellite, if you collect the data, it can be at any point in that orbit, isn't it? At any point in that particular satellite's orbit, right? How many satellites do you think we will need? At least 3, isn't it? At least 3. Very good. We will need at least 3 satellites to pinpoint our exact location, and 4. If you have 4, you can pinpoint your location very well. The more the number of satellites you connect with, the better or higher your location accuracy will be. So that is why maybe you switch on your location services in your mobile phone, and it will take a lot of time. Sometimes a lot of time it will take to load the exact location, isn't it? Isn't it? You might have experienced that. Sometimes it will load very fast, sometimes it will take a lot of time. Why? It will have to collect data from different satellites. So the more the number of satellites, the higher your location accuracy will be. So this process, or this method of collecting this data and pinpointing your location, it is called satellite ranging. That is basically, what you calculate here is the time required for a signal from the satellite to reach the receiver. So based on that time required, you can pinpoint your location, because the signal will travel at the speed of light, and the satellite will sense how much time it took for the signal to go to the receiver and come back to the satellite. So based on that time required for traveling of the signal, you will do ranging. You will find out at the possible location at which the receiver is located, right? So here you can see three different steps. So first one, if you have a single satellite, you might be able to identify your location in one particular orbit. It can be anywhere. It can be anywhere at this distance. Using satellite ranging, the velocity, time, so you can calculate the distance, right? So based on that, you pinpoint a particular orbit or a particular distance at which your receiver is located, but you don't know where exactly it is. So if you have two satellites, you can see here, you have two satellites. The location can be anywhere on the sphere. You have two satellites. If you have two satellites, you are trying to pinpoint your location. You see this sender, you see a circle in between these two spheres where they intersect. That will create a location, right? So your receiver will be anywhere within that location, right? Suppose you have three satellites. So here you have three satellites, and using satellite ranging, you are pinpointing the location and you are calculating the time required for the signal to go and come back to the satellite, go to the receiver and come back to the satellite. So you are trying to do ranging, and if you have three satellites, you can make sure that you will know that your receiver is at any of these 2 points A or B, where all these ranged distances interact, or these spheres interact, right? It can be at A or B, isn't it? So if you have a fourth satellite, then well and good, you can pinpoint it down to a single point. But if you pinpoint it like this, A and B, most probably one of these signals will be off the Earth's surface, or sometimes it will be improbable, unrealistic location you might get. So you can actually pinpoint, you can bring it down to one point A or B. Sometimes it will fall off the ground surface, so that's not possible, isn't it? Sometimes it will be off the Earth's surface, so that's not possible. So out of A and B, out of the 2 points that has been arranged and concluded, one of those points might fall off the Earth's surface, or some one of that point might seem improbable. So the satellite will pinpoint your location as A or B. So at least three satellites are required for determining your exact location using satellite ranging. So if you have a fourth one, then you can always be sure it to be at a point A or B specifically. All right, clear? All right. So this method is called satellite ranging. So you have different GPS positioning systems. So you have US satellites, you have Russian satellites, European, Indian, etc. You have US GPS, you have Russian's GLONASS system, you have the European Galileo system, you have the Indian IRSS system, etc. Right? And anyway, you have all so many satellites and everything, but still there is a window for error. There are so many different errors that has to be considered when pinpointing an exact location. So the most common errors are cloak bias, satellite ephemeris error, then errors due to atmospheric conditions, the receiver's errors, the multipath errors. So many errors are there, right? So what is this cloak bias? So if there might not be a sync between the GPS and the receiver's clock, so there will be a cloak bias. That is one thing. Then you will have some uncertainty in the satellite's orbit sometimes, so that causes some error called satellite ephemeris error. Then signal velocity varies depending upon the atmospheric condition, right? Based on the atmospheric interaction, sometimes the signal velocity varies. So due to atmospheric conditions also, there can be error in the satellite ranging, isn't it? So that's also possible. Then due to some noise or signal matching errors or electrical noise, there can be some error in the receiver as well. Then multipath error, sometimes the reflected signal might not be in a straight line path between the satellite and the receiver, so that error is called multipath error. So all these errors has to be taken into consideration when you are pinpointing the exact location for the reference data, most importantly. Clear? Then moving on to GIS, or Geographic Information System. What is GIS? Geographic Information Systems. As the name suggests, it's a set of information, it's a set of data can be any data, right? It's a set of information which has a particular geographic location associated with it, right? A geographic location, you know the exact location of a particular feature, or different features, you know the exact location, and you have some information about that particular feature. It is GIS, right? Geographic information system, the information about any feature which has a particular geographic location associated with it. It's all classified as geographic information systems, or GIS, right? So for a more formal definition, GIS, these are PC based systems that can deal with virtually any type of information about features that can be referenced by a geographic location, right? So GIS systems or geographic information systems, they can handle locational data and attribute data both. What do you mean by this locational data? The particular location or the coordinates at which a particular feature exists, right? Suppose our campus exists at a particular geographic location. We know the coordinates where the campus is, right? And what is the attribute data? Any data associated with a feature in a particular location or at a particular coordinate is called attribute data. So the locational data of our campus, we know the geographic coordinates of our campus, right? That is locational data. We know that this is a building, we know that this is a university, we know so this university have a built up area of so and so many students are studying here, so many courses are offered. All these data are associated with the feature that is at a particular location, right? So all these data contribute to the attribute data, the attributes of a feature at that particular location, that is attribute data. Any further data that is attributed to a particular feature at a location, that is attributed data. Locational data, you look at this geographic location of the particular feature, we know the exact geographic coordinates of this feature, that is your locational data. Clear? So all this data, it is stored and manipulated in database management systems, and using SQL servers you can identify and manipulate and use any of this data stored in these database management systems. So you have different types of data series, files, layers, all these different types of data are available in GIS, and that data can be used to interpret or interpolate or extrapolate or analyze another topic of consideration. One common example of that is an overlay analysis. You can interpret some data, you can interpolate some data, you can extrapolate some data, and you can even analyze another topic of consideration. So one example of that is overlay analysis. What do you mean by overlay analysis? As the name suggests, you are overlaying different layers. Okay, that is overlay analysis. So from there are many applications for overlay analysis. So one common example is potential soil erosion. What is the possibility of soil erosion at a particular location? So what are the factors that contribute to soil erosion? What all you are, suppose you are going to study the potential hazard from soil erosion at a particular site. What all data will you consider? Soil type is one thing, density of the soil, surface runoff and flooding. So all these factors will contribute to soil erosion, isn't it? So all these data can be merged, right? All these data can be merged to identify whether there is potential soil erosion at a particular land, isn't it? Do you agree? So here you can see, this is a classic example of overlay analysis. Here you have the source map. You have different data. You have the data from the topography, the soil, the land cover, geology, ownership, all these data you have, right? Right? You have different data that has been acquired. Using remote sensing systems in the GIS, you have saved data about the topography, data about the soil at the site, data about the land cover at the site, data about the geology at the site, data about the overshed. So these source maps, you can create your land data files. What do you see here? You can see that the whole area is divided into grids, right? And in each of these grids, it is similar to that DNs that we saw, digital numbers that we saw, right? The various brightnesses, it represented various features or different reflectances, isn't it? Similarly, this doesn't represent DNs or brightness or reflectance anything. Here, suppose you have the topography. This has been converted it into a grid shaped raster image. Suppose in each of these boxes you have different features. Suppose you have different features and soil. In some of these you have a particular type of soil, some of these you have another type of soil. So you will have the all these land data files you have, and from these files you can derive some data about the slope of the ground. From the topography map you can identify the slope of the ground. Using the soils and the land cover you can find out the erodibility of that particular site. Then based on the geology, rainfall data, etc., if you merge that you can get the runoff of the ground. All this data you can collect, isn't it? And at a particular location, here you can see in the derived data you can see three particular at a particular location, the same exact geographical location, you are merging the data from slope, erodibility and runoff. These three are three of the major factors that contribute to potential soil erosion, right? The slope of the ground, erodibility of the soil and the surface runoff. These three are three major parameters that contribute to soil erosion. So if you merge these three data, you will get an output here which shows the potential soil erosion map of the area. Is that clear? So you have a GIS, you have all the data that you need, you have all this data which is mapped to a particular geographic location, right? You cannot merge all these images if they are if they are not geographically mapped, isn't it? Do you agree? All these layers, they should be matching geographically. Then only you can merge this data and obtain the potential soil erosion map. Yes or no? Is that clear? There are few other operations in GIS. Aggregation, buffering, network analysis, intervisibility and perspective views. So using these data in GIS, you can aggregate, you can combine different map categories just like we saw in overlay analysis. You can do buffering, you can create zones of specific width around a feature. You can go for network analysis. You can identify the shortest path between 2 points. You can identify the stream flow in drainage basins. You can find out the optimum location for a fire station. So for finding out the shortest path, or for identifying the road systems and transportation systems, etc., you can go for network analysis. Then another operation is intervisibility. So using elevation data, you can create different perspectives from different locations. So that is intervisibility operation in GIS. Then you can develop perspective views. That is another operation in GIS. So if you have different different terrain surfaces, you can portray them in different viewing positions. So these are a few commonly used operations in commonly done operations in GIS. And there are two primary approaches to represent locations. So one is a raster, another one is a vector. So raster, as I showed you earlier in that overlay analysis, these are raster files. You have divided the whole area into different grids, and each of these grids will have some data in it, right? So this is an example of raster file. So it's a grid cell. The values in each cell depicts data about that particular cell. So if you have a finer grid, you will obviously have more data, or more specific data you will have if you have a finer grid. So for overlay analysis, raster files are preferred. Then you have vector files. I told you in the last class and today's class also we discussed vector shape files. I was keeping on telling that particular term, vector shape files, right? So what you created for your hands-on application was a vector shape file of our campus, right? You created a polygon, you created a boundary of our campus, right? So it is a polygon format. So it will feature the boundaries. You can convert it feature boundaries converted to straight side polygons approximating original regions. You generate a boundary of a region, right? You can it basically it's a polygon. It's a it's a combination of different number of straight lines. So vector data, it represents a polygon format, and it is usually used to represent boundaries, right? So and also it is preferred for network analysis because it's a series of lines, and you are you can draw any shapes in it. It's basically you can use it for network analysis. So digital remote sensing images are collected in raster format, and they are integrated for data interpretation. Suppose I showed you the land use land cover dynamics work that I have done for Kerala, right? So what I did was, I have collected the raster data, the satellite image for the whole area I have collected, and finally I have cut out the boundary of Kerala from that, isn't it? The satellite images do not have a do not capture the image of Kerala alone or a particular location alone. Suppose Ooty, let's talk about Ooty. I have a satellite image that captures the image of Ooty. It doesn't capture the image of only the Ooty or Nilgiris district area, isn't it? It captures the whole satellite area, the whole area covered by that satellite. You will have that data, right? I showed you the Earth Explorer website and how to download the satellite image, right? So satellite image, you have a raster data, and from that you are cropping out the area of your interest, right? You create a vector file of the particular boundary of interest, you overlay these two, you merge these two, so that from that raster file, from the whole satellite image, you cut out a particular location of your interest. Nilgiris district, I have the boundary as a vector file. So that vector file I used to cut out some data from that raster file. So I will have the particular satellite image of the Nilgiris district alone, something like that. So you can integrate your raster and vector files for interpreting data in remote sensing. Then you can manipulate that data, you can interpolate, extrapolate, analyze that data, and you can modify that data to data for various applications. Clear? So we will stop here. Tomorrow we will start uh, basics of photogrammetry.